So I know a bunch of crazy news just dropped that I'm going to be talking about what fights I should be made after UFC Fight Night Strickland versus Imavov. It was a pretty good card overall, but I will probably talk about it more in my UFC 283 predictions. And let's just get straight into it. Sean Strickland won the main event. It was at 205 pounds, but he did take the fight on very short notice, and I do think that he should be rewarded for doing so. And I'm looking at the UFC rankings here. I'm waiting for my laptop to load. There's something seriously wrong with my laptop. I cannot wait to start recording videos on my PC, which is just much more powerful. But if you look at the UFC rankings at middleweight and we scroll down a little bit, Sean Strickland, he's just beat the number 13 ranked guy, but he stepped on such short notice. I think you got to reward him with either a big name or a very high ranked guy. So the two options I've got is Robert Whittaker potentially. I don't know what Robert Whittaker is looking at, but Whittaker versus Strickland would be rewarding Strickland and also giving Robert Whittaker that title eliminator fight that he needs. Maybe he could just fight Pereira if Pereira beats Adesanya, but I don't see Robert Whittaker as the guy that wants to sit out. He wanted to fight Costa, and that's the other option as well that I've got is maybe you do try and give Paulo Costa that fight against Sean Strickland. Paulo Costa might look at it as a much more winnable matchup than the fight against Robert Whittaker, so Paulo Costa might be inclined to actually take that fight, but I'm not too sure. But we move on from that. That's the two options. I've got the next option for the loser of the main event is actually Nasruddin Imavov to just fight Calvin Gastelum. Again, the fight's been booked twice. It didn't quite happen. Gastelum's out with an injury, it seems, with his mouth. I don't know how long it's going to take to heal, but Imavov's probably going to want to take a little bit of time off as well, and he might even be wanting to wait for the card to come up in France sometime in the middle of the year. So by then, Gastelum should have recovered and be healthy, and then Imavov can fight on the France card that we know was probably going to happen sometime in the middle of the year. I just spoiled the next one, but the next one was Dan Ige. Once again, you've got to look into the rankings. He won the co-main event over an unranked fighter in Damon Jackson. He defended his ranking position. He was on a losing streak before, so you can't just jump him straight up the rankings, in my opinion. And you've got to look at the featherweight rankings here. I will just remove my overlay for a second. And Dan Ige was ranked number 13. I don't think his ranking's going to change. He beat an unranked guy. I thought about Dan Ige fighting another unranked guy in Jonathan Pierce, who used to be the number 15 ranked. Him and Alex Caceres trade that number 15 rank all the time. But I thought maybe let's just give him another fight. Let's give him Sadiq Yusuff. I know Sadiq Yusuff was meant to fight Giga Chikadze, and that fight fell out. But I feel like Sadiq Yusuff would probably take a Dan Ige fight, because if Sadiq Yusuff wins that, he probably moves up a couple of ranks in the division, and then he can look at fighting someone like Giga Chikadze, Calvin Kattar even, I don't know, maybe even Korean Zombie, I don't know, something like that is kind of my thinking behind that matchup. The next one is Roman Kopylov. He just beat Punahele Soriano. He's on a 2-fight win streak, but you do have to take in consideration that he is 2-2 in the UFC. He lost his first 2 fights. Now he's on a little bit of a win streak, and I think we do give him a big step up in competition. This is a banger. I'm pretty proud of this one. Bruno Silva versus Roman Kopylov would be an insane fight. I believe Bruno Silva's finished almost every win of his. He's got 19 wins by knockout. He's absolutely insane. He had a pretty competitive fight with Alex Pereira on the feet, and then just blundered the GM3 fight. He did pull out of a fight that was meant to be in December against Albert Duraev, so maybe he's injured, I don't know, but Roman Kopylov will probably be looking to return in 3 or 4 months, I would assume, so hopefully that would give Bruno Silva enough time to be prepared for that fight. That's what I'm thinking anyway. You could give him someone else. I'm trying to think of another name in my head when I was looking through the UFC's unofficial out of the rankings, but I do think Bruno Silva does make sense to me. I think that would be a very fun fight. Raquel Pennington, once again, you got to look to the rankings. So we go to the rankings, the women's bantamweight rankings, and here she is, number 5. She just beat number 2, Ketlin Vieira. There's a champion that hasn't fought since July of last year, Amanda Nunes. I don't know if they're trying to do the Juliana Pena trilogy. I feel like that might be maybe the best legacy move for Amanda Nunes to defeat the woman who defeated her for the first time in many years. But I'm also thinking of the second fight was so dominant. Do we really need to see it again? And then again, she hasn't fought since July, so she's got to fight someone. So why not make it the number 2 ranked now, Raquel Pennington, who technically may or may not have beaten Ketlin Vieira? Let's just do it. Just whatever makes Amanda Nunes fight. She hasn't fought since July last year. I think we need to get her a little bit more active, especially because she's not getting any younger. Umar Nurmagomedov just beat Raoni Barcelos. It was a pretty competitive fight on the feet, and then Umar knocked him out. He said it was the first time he's ever knocked someone out like that in his career, which is pretty insane. And he's talking in the post-fight interviews, and he's just talking in general like he already has a fight lined up for March the 4th, because he said, I want to fight March the 4th, I don't care who it is, March the 4th. And afterwards, someone said, he called out Ricky Simone for ducking him. Apparently, Ricky Simone turned down a fight with him, which is why he fought Barcelos. And then the interviewer said, do you want to fight Ricky Simone? And Umar Nurmagomedov said no. When I called that guy out, he said, who was that guy? Who was that guy? Well, I'm right here. I don't want to fight Ricky Simone. He wants to fight someone, and by the sounds of it, it sounds like he's actually got a fight booked. The way that he was speaking, he's got a fight, or at least in his head, or a matchup in his head. The interviewer didn't ask who it was, but there is someone on this list that I think would never turn any fight down. It's Pedro Munoz. I think Pedro Munoz would lose. I do think Pedro Munoz would get finished. At this point, he's 36 years old, and he's actually never been finished in his entire career, which is pretty insane. But I do think Umar would be the first guy to finish Pedro Munoz. Pedro Munoz is direct number 9. Umar Nurmagomedov is ranked number 11. He still hasn't fought anyone ranked, so we've got to give him someone ranked, and I think Pedro Munoz would be likely. And then I think after that, you could maybe look at like the top 6, top 7 guys. I don't think Dominic Cruz would take a fight with Umar at this point in his career. So I think that's a pretty logical fight to make. Maybe Yadong Song. I did think about the Song Yadong fight as well, but just didn't end up really going with it. I thought Pedro Munoz would be more likely to accept the fight. Javid Basharat called out Chris Gutierrez, saying Chris Gutierrez has not fought anyone to be in the ranking position he's in. And when you look at him, he's not really wrong, is he? He's on a crazy win streak. He did get 10-8'd by Cody Durden, which isn't the good look. Split decision with Felipe Colares, who isn't even in the UFC anymore. Beat Dinar Butgaray, which was a pretty good win at the time. And then he beat Frankie Edgar, and now he's ranked number 12. And he's got to defend that ranking position against someone. I just gave away the next matchup, sorry. Javid Basharat, I think that makes sense. I think it's a very winnable fight for Javid Basharat using his wrestling. I know Javid's a good striker too. It's a good fight. And Mateus Mendonca, just give him anyone. Mateus Mendonca, sorry guys, give me 1 moment. Apologies for that, sorry. By debuting against Javid Basharat, that tells me that Mateus Mendonca is going to fight anybody. It doesn't matter who you give him, he's going to fight them. Abdulrazak Al-Hassan, he didn't do it in his post-fight interview, but in his interview afterwards, like the post-fight press conference for Abdulrazak Al-Hassan, he went crazy at Joaquin Buckley. He called Joaquin Buckley all sorts of things. He called him things I'm not going to say on this channel because of the new YouTube policy that's going to get me demonetized, but he said, he called Joaquin Buckley so many things. He was swearing, he was saying this and that, he was going crazy, and I just think, like, a post-fight interview like that, let's just do it. Like, dude, you gotta watch it. Like, it was crazy. It was actually the funniest post-fight interview I've ever seen, because I never expected Abdulrazak Al-Hassan to speak like that, and he was just calling Joaquin Buckley the funniest things. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, it was pretty good. I want to see that. Matthias Rebecki beat Nick Fiore. In my opinion, didn't look as impressive as I thought he was going to. I thought he was going to knock out Nick Fiore in the first round. He didn't do that. But I do think that Matthias Rebecki is a guy that is going to end up in the top 15. I do think he's a guy that is very high level. But he did disappoint me in this fight quite a bit. I think he gassed out like 6 minutes into the fight. He gassed out trying to knock out Nick Fiore in the first round. Nick Fiore, I think he seriously needs to consider calling up the Nick Diaz Academy, because he would be a perfect fighter for them. He's got really good jiu-jitsu, which wasn't on show here, but he's so tough. I think he's got the style to be a Nick Diaz Academy guy. That would be awesome. That Matthias Rebecki, I think you guys might think I'm doing someone dirty here, and to be fair, I am, but it is a winnable fight for him too. Clay Guida, for some reason, has the most insane cardio at the age of 41. He's got really good wrestling as well, and he probably could potentially wrestle Matthias Rebecki to a win, but I think it would also be a big step up the rankings for Matthias Rebecki, and I think it's just a fight that might need to be done. Other than that, Nasrat Haqparast was a guy that I thought about, but UFC probably wants to give Nasrat Haqparast a more winnable fight. So yeah, I'm giving Matthias Rebecki to Clay Guida. You might not like it. I don't really like it either, but if we're really going to send Rebecki up the rankings, I think it makes sense, and it's actually a really good opportunity for Clay Guida to get a pretty insane win as well on his record at the very end of his career, which would be cool. But that's what I was looking at in the rankings. I know I'm doing them really dirty, but you've got to send Rebecki up the rankings somehow. But and even then, it's a very winnable fight for Clay Guida as well. Alan Nascimento just beat Carlos Hernandez. Not too sure why I brought up that tab. His opponent that I think he should fight is Cody Durden. Cody Durden sitting borderline outside of the top 15 right now. We just won 2 fights in a row, albeit over a short notice opponent in Carlos Mota. But Carlos Mota's still dangerous. Durden's a really good wrestler. He's a pretty good grappler. And I think Alan Nascimento, after seeing him beat Carlos Hernandez just in the way that he did, I think we're going to see Nascimento like in the top 15 at one point in his career. I think he's getting a little bit older for flyweight as well. So if he's going to move up the rankings, he has to move up now. So I think that Cody Durden is a pretty logical step up in competition. Winnable fight for Durden too. Winnable fight for Nascimento. Just gave away the next opponent. I'm so bad at that. I'm closing the tabs as I go because my laptop literally cannot handle it. Yeah, Dan Argueta just beat Nick Aguirre, who was a very short notice opponent. Took the fight in like 3 or 4 days notice. It was pretty insane, and he had a pretty good account for himself in my opinion. But Dan Argueta, we've got to give him a step up in competition. I know he stepped in against Damon Jackson and lost that fight on short notice upper weight class. I don't know if he wants to stay at 135, but it sounds like he wants to stay at 145 and he wants to fight soon. Apologies, I'm still not feeling 100% unfortunately, but a step up in competition would be TJ Brown, and I think that's a fight that we do. He just beat Eric Silva in at the end of 2022 in December, and I think he'll probably be looking for a somewhat fast turnaround himself. So maybe like, if we're talking fast turnarounds, let's say like 2, 3, 4 months, TJ Brown versus Dan Argueta makes sense. Both are pretty good wrestlers and grapplers. I think it's a fight that makes sense. Now, Charles Johnson is an interesting case for me because I have reached out to Charles Johnson somewhat recently, about a week ago, it probably was now. And Charles Johnson posted something on Instagram, and he said that he wants to fight overseas or something. I can't remember what it was. It's kind of like a meme post, but he said he wanted to fight overseas ASAP. So I hit him up. Oh, I didn't hit him up. I just commented, did you want to fight at UFC 284 if you beat Jimmy Flick? And he said, yeah. I've got an Australian flyweight who's not signed to the UFC, who is apparently, according to his management, trying to get fights, but he just can't find fights on the Australian regional scene. He hasn't fought since 2021. Stephen Erceg versus Charles Johnson. If Charles Johnson really wants to fight in Australia at UFC 284, I think him versus Stephen Erceg makes sense. Stephen Erceg is from Perth. He's literally from Perth, which is where the event is at UFC 284. He's struggling to find opponents on the regional Australian scene, and Charles Johnson wants to fight in Australia. So, I mean, there's not really anyone else, is there? There's not really another flyweight on the Australian regional scene, I think, that is ready to jump up to the UFC right now and make 125 on short notice. So, Charles Johnson versus Stephen Erceg. Very similar stylistic matchup to Jimmy Flick. A winnable fight for Johnson. I think he'd be pretty keen to take it if he was offered it, and it would really stamp down the fact that he wants to be the most active flyweight in the UFC. He'd be literally making a 3-week turnaround, which would be absolutely ridiculous in another country. So that's my long shot. I didn't really look at the flyweight division aside from that because I just had that fight in the back of my mind. But if that's not an option, like, what do we do? You can't give him a ranked fighter yet. Maybe just him versus Alan Nascimento. You could probably do that. But other than that, there is a couple of flyweights on the rise, so maybe you could give him someone else. But yeah, I think that's a fight that makes sense. Charles Johnson took this fight on short notice as well. But yeah, I think you can probably do anything with Charles Johnson. He doesn't seem like the guy that's going to turn down a fight, does he? So I think he fought Muhammad Makayev on short notice as well. So yeah, it's just the guy that's not going to turn down fights. He could do anything with them. But yeah, I'm going to leave the video there. I'm going to make videos of that Jones. There's so many information. John Jones' new deal. Francis Ngannou's out of the UFC. Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman's been made. Oh my goodness, this is news time. I need to get to it, so I'm going to leave you there. Keep an eye out for more future videos. Thank you very much. If you made it this far and you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe and like the video. I would appreciate that, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.